Welcome to The Explainer. If you're a focused learner looking to uncover the hidden gears behind exactly how we're taught and tested, well, you are in the exact right place. Today, we're investigating a fascinating mystery: how our underlying philosophical assumptions dictate exactly how we teach, evaluate, and assess human minds. You see, every test you've ever taken was built on a specific theory of reality. Let's get into it. Okay, let's dive into this. I want you to actively reflect for a moment. Think back to when you got your very first smartphone. How did you actually learn to use it? Did you just figure it out through trial and error? Did you painstakingly sit there and read a manual? Or did you just watch someone else swipe and tap and then kind of copy their actions? Let's look at another highly relatable scenario. If I asked you to memorize a short 4-line poem right now, what's your process? Some of you would literally repeat the lines aloud over and over again. Others might visualize the story happening in their mind's eye, or maybe look for a rhyming pattern. The point is, different people use entirely different processes to learn the exact same thing. And you know what? This brilliantly illustrates our central thesis for today. If learning is understood differently, whether that's repeating, observing, or connecting, then the way we assess that learning absolutely must fundamentally change too. The way we define learning completely influences what we assess, how we assess, and how we interpret the evidence of that learning. So to really understand this, we're going to look through 3 major philosophical lenses.
Section 1. Observable performance.
So early educational psychology was heavily driven by foundational thinkers like John B. Watson and B.F. Skinner. To really get into their behaviorist mindset, ask yourself, why is the curriculum for a 2nd grader so much lighter than it is for a 10th grader? Well, from this perspective, learning is viewed as an incremental, externally observable progression of steps. You master one small, specific behavior, and then you step up to the next, slightly heavier one. It's like a giant staircase. This entire perspective is rooted in the philosophy of empiricism. Basically, empiricism posits that knowledge comes entirely through our sensory experience. Reality is out there in the world, and it is entirely observable. In this strict, no-nonsense view, internal mental processes are either discarded entirely, or they're just considered unaccountable. Simply put, if we can't see it and measure it, well, it just doesn't count. So the crucial point for the behaviorist is that learning is simply a relatively permanent change in behavior resulting from practice. It relies heavily on a stimulus and response relationship. You provide a stimulus, the learner responds, and if they get it right, boom, you provide reinforcement to strengthen and sustain that learning. Because learning is viewed purely as observable performance, the assessment naturally follows suit. Behaviorist assessment relies on frequent, often machine-gradable tests. We're talking multiple choice, fill-in-the-blanks, and matching items. The whole goal is to check mastery of a specific objective and provide immediate feedback. You either got the observable response correct, or you didn't. Cut and dry. Section 2. Cognitivism. Mental understanding. But wait, what actually happens inside the mind? Heavily influenced by psychologists like Jean Piaget and Jerome Bruner, cognitivism shifts our focus to the inside. Try this quick mental exercise. Imagine looking at a 9-digit number for a few seconds and then trying to reproduce it. How do you do it? Do you group the digits into 3s, kind of like a phone number? Or do you see a numerical pattern? Cognitivists care deeply about this. They don't just care if you output the right 9 digits, they care about the internal mental process you used to get there. The underlying philosophy here is rationalism. While cognitivists agree that reality exists independently of the learner, they argue that knowledge isn't merely the external object itself. Instead, knowledge depends heavily on how our minds perceive, attend to, organize, and encode that reality. Reason and mental organization are absolutely central to acquiring knowledge. In the cognitivist worldview, just giving the correct answer, that's not enough for a teacher. If a learner blurts out the right answer but literally cannot explain the internal logic, the comprehension, and the reasoning of how they arrived at it, well, the cognitivist would say that sufficient learning hasn't actually taken place yet. Under this lens, the assessment tools radically change. We move entirely away from those multiple choice tests and move toward things like essays, concept maps, classification, and problem-solving tasks. The questions change from "what is the answer" to "explain why" or "justify your reasoning." The goal here is to diagnose understanding, uncover hidden misconceptions, and really see how the learner processes information.
Section 3. Constructivism. Meaning-making.
Championed by thinkers like Lev Vygotsky, Constructivism focuses on meaning-making through our environment. Let's walk through a simple but honestly profound thought experiment. Look up at the clouds. You might see the shape of a bird, while the person standing right next to you sees a mountain. Why is that? It's because we don't just passively receive reality, we actively interpret our experiences by connecting them to our prior knowledge. We literally construct our understanding of the world. Constructivism shares a very close affinity with the philosophy of pragmatism. In this view, reality is encountered through interpretation and context. Knowledge isn't just some mental copy of the outside world, it's actively constructed meaning that emerges through our experiences, our actions, our reflections, and the social exchanges we have with the people around us. Now, what's really interesting about this is the profound implication it has for teaching. In the constructivist view, two learners can sit through the exact same lesson, understand it completely differently based on their unique prior experiences, and both still be legitimately learning. Learning is the active reconstruction of understanding. Because learning is viewed as highly personalized meaning-making, assessment becomes this continuous, collaborative process. Isolated testing gets completely replaced by portfolios, massive projects, and reflective journals. And the teacher isn't the only evaluator anymore. Peers assess each other and learners self-assess. The focus shifts entirely to authentic application. Basically, how would you actually use this idea out in the real world? Section 4. Synthesis, Strengths, Limitations, and Practice. Let's move to and see how this all builds together. We've explored the core mechanics, but how do we take these frameworks and actually apply them to the real world? Comparing the major merits side by side reveals a really holistic view of education. Behaviorism values accuracy, giving us clarity and easily measurable outcomes, which is great for foundational skills. Cognitivism values coherence, deepening our conceptual understanding and reasoning. And constructivism, it values interpretation, promoting authentic, collaborative meaning-making. But of course, no single perspective is perfectly sufficient on its own. Actually, scratch that. Every perspective has its practical challenges. Behaviorism can sometimes encourage mechanical, robotic learning while totally ignoring creativity. Cognitivism relies on internal mental processes that are notoriously difficult to actually observe and measure. And constructivism, while highly authentic, can be incredibly time-consuming, highly subjective, and really tough to manage in large, crowded classes. Because of these strengths and limitations, a master teacher doesn't just pick one team and stick to it. In practice, real-world educators weave all three epistemological lenses together. They might use behaviorism for drilling basic multiplication tables, switch over to cognitivism to teach the underlying concepts of algebra, and then use constructivism to have students design a real-world budget project. They use the whole shebang. If you take away only one thing from this explainer, let it be this absolutely crucial quote from our source material. Assessment follows the path of learning. You simply cannot separate the two. How we define the human mind and how we define the act of learning will completely and always shape exactly how we attempt to measure it. So, I'll leave you with this final lingering thought to reflect on. Look back at your own educational journey. Which of these three perspectives, behaviorism, cognitivism, or constructivism, seems closest to what you personally consider meaningful learning? Analyzing your own habits might just change the way you approach learning forever. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.